Okay, hi everyone, and welcome to episode 1 of Purple Hyacinth. And today, first of all, we're very excited because this is the very first episode we're recording. The prologue comes first chronologically, but in terms of actual schedule, we're recording this first. So it's super exciting. And I'm very excited to get into Purple Hyacinth. And for today, we have Inspirashamul and Krystine, and they will both tell you about themselves. And let's take it away.
Okay, I'll go first. Hi everyone, I'm Krystine. I live in Southern California. I am a baker by trade, and but I also studied music when I was in college for a little bit. And the first webtoon that I got into was Sirens Lament, and I saw an ad on YouTube for it, and ever since then I've been hooked on webtoons.
Hi, I'm Inspirashamul. I live in Virginia on the East Coast, and I got into webtoons with Tower of God, and I think only Tower of God and Purple Hyacinth are the ones that I decide to fast pass. So I love both of them. It's great. I think I caught up Purple Hyacinth in, I think episode 7 was when I actually caught up. So I've been around for a while. I have a YouTube channel that does chapter reviews as well. We're a little further down now that it's been out, but I'm glad to see someone else join in.
Awesome, yeah. And I did not know that Inspirashamul had that channel, although I saw it. I didn't know it was him, but now I do, and I'm going to listen to it. And I just realized I probably should introduce myself because Purple Hyacinth readers may not know who I am. So my name is 𝗵𝗲𝗪𝗃𝗪. I live in New Jersey. I'm married. I have 2 kids, and I currently work as a content curator. I'm finishing up my MBA. And I got into webtoons. Let me just explain. I was a lot of a literature snob before. One of my undergraduates is in English, the other is in psychology and Judaic studies. And I only read classic literature. I was an extreme snob. It was very, very rare that I picked up anything written past like the 1950s. And I kept seeing this ad on Facebook for what was 𝗦𝘽𝗶𝗵𝗺, and I was like, I'm not reading that. That's cheesy. And then I just finally did click on it, and I completely fell in love with 𝗦𝘽𝗶𝗵𝗺, so much so that I started a podcast on it, and I've been doing that for like a good half a year. So, but I also read other webtoons, and I found myself falling in love with Purple Hyacinth. And I was reading, and I recognized that feeling, and I'm like, I think I want to do a podcast about this as well. So here I am, and I'm very excited to start. So yeah, I'll start us off. We'll be talking about the first episode. So just to recap a little bit of the last episode. In the last episode, Lauren diffuses a bomb. We learned that she seems to have the special ability to detect lies, and that she was involved in this tragic train accident called Allendale. So that's just a quick recap. So we start out this episode. There is this beautiful image of clouds, cloudy sky, starry night, hazy clouds, beautiful. And we see a person who we know to be the Purple Hyacinth outside of standing on like this thing jutting out of someone's roof, and there's this woman inside and he's outside. But she sees, she turns around, she sees the window open, she hears some noise, turns around, and she sees a gloved hand coming towards her, because what is happening? Very quickly, he stifles her, and there's this lovely jettison of blood. So we're left to infer that Purple Hyacinth has committed his first assassination of the evening. Possibly first. And I will actually admit, I wanted to tell you all that I first came across Purple Hyacinth when the very, very first time I started reading webtoons. I was exploring the platform and I came across Purple Hyacinth. And when I read this, I was like, oh my gosh, this is incredibly violent. And I turned it off. I didn't read it again for months. I was like, I'm not reading this. It's too gory. I can't handle it. I'm the kind of person who never watches like action movies because they're like, oh, I can't handle it. It's like so sad. People are dying. So I turned it off. I was like, I refused to read it for months and months. And then one of my good 𝗦𝘽𝗶𝗵𝗺 friends recommended it. And she was like, oh, it's really good. And I was like, you know what? I trust her opinion. Let me give it another chance. And I'm glad I did. And yeah, but that's honestly, I mean, his assassinating people is a key element of the story, because it's obviously not a very moral thing to do, to kill people. And it's something that, we as readers, and Lauren especially, will have to contend with in terms of coming to terms with who the Purple Hyacinth is, which we're gonna his name is currently still the Purple Hyacinth. Yeah, and feel free to chime in at any moment, guys.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. There's something about the way that everything is drawn, and just like, I'm not a gore person either, but I don't know, there's something almost beautiful about the way it's drawn in a way.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's gore, but I mean, like, it's still like stunning gore. Like, I don't know how to,
No, I know
say
what
it.
you mean. I know what you mean, especially when 𝗪𝗠, who's the one that draws this, uses the red not only with the
Yeah.
lies, but it also ties in well with the red of the blood and other red aspects that we see in the webtoon. It all ties in very cohesively, which is awesome.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's actually something, I'm glad you mentioned the artwork. You know, that's like, if we want to talk about the artwork in general, I am blown away by the artwork.
Mhm.
Beautiful and stunning is exactly right. There's this sort of poetry and surrealness, and like everything is beautiful. Obviously the characters are beautiful and their costumes are beautiful and the coloring is beautiful and the lighting is beautiful, but yeah, everything is, they're very graceful figures. You know, one thing that every artist has their own way of drawing things, and all the characters in Purple Hyacinth are pretty slim, if you notice that, but they're very graceful in the way that they move. And there's definitely a lot of movement that you can sense. I'm not such a, like, we have a person who does the Midnight Poppyland who's very visually oriented, and she can always talk about like the setting and the staging of the camera, and that's her strength. It's not necessarily my strength, but I do definitely notice that Purple Hyacinth is drawn very exquisitely and very flowing kind of way.
And I think one of the highlights of Purple Hyacinth is it really uses the medium in webtoons, right? People in other mediums like comics or manga, they have to read right to left or flip pages, but webtoon is a streamlined effect of someone scrolling down and down on the page. And even with this, I think the second kill that the Hyacinth does with the man, the way that the lines kind of show, it almost looks like the blade is what we're seeing, and we're seeing the reflection of the assassin killing the man. And we see that because it's in a huge vertical panel as we see the blood flow. So 𝗪𝗠 really knows what she's doing. F also knows what she's doing with the writing. It's masterfully done. The first episode and the prologue is a really good hook for people to get invested into the story already.
That's actually,
Yeah.
That's, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I was gonna say, I actually found Purple Hyacinth when it was still on Discover or Canvas. So reading it, I was already like, oh my God, this is gorgeous. And then so when it finally became a
An original
one. Yeah, an original, thank you. I was so excited. And like I feel like the artwork just got even better, which I'm like, how do you do that? Like it was already gorgeous, and then she just stepped it up a notch. Just amazing.
You mentioned that with the vertical format, so if you realize every time the blood drips, you know, it drips over, it's visualized. You can just see it roll down. So yeah, what happens next is that it seems like there's a bit of a time lapse, either that after he killed the maid, but there's a gun, and we'll learn it's not the Purple Hyacinth's gun, it's the victim's gun. And sadly, his gun did not help him because he gets murdered too. You know, we have this, you know, kind of scream, and like you said, we see the reflection of the Purple Hyacinth in the background, and you see, looks like he's cutting him somewhere in his head area. His mouth is open, he's screaming, you know, it is gory. It is visually gory. You kind of have to desensitize yourself. That's, like I said, I wasn't able to do that the first time, but I had to learn to do that to read this cartoon. To read this web story, I guess. I don't like to call it cartoon.
It's not necessarily gory every episode, at least. So like there's key episodes where it's accentuated, but
yeah. And then speaking of beauty, you have this absolutely gorgeous panel where the Purple Hyacinth is backlit with the window, and everything is in this blue hazy light. He's centered. Again, the artwork is just beautiful. You know, he's in shadow, the light is behind him, and you see everything is monochrome. It's just blue and white, except for his hand with the blade. That's bloody. You know, again, to visual contrast and emphasis. And his hair is beautiful. Just
jealous, very jealous.
Yeah. And he tells him, even though he is presumably dead, we're not actually, maybe he's not dead because he's talking to him. He says his face is cut off here, and he says greeting from the leader. And you know, that again, there's this artistic effect of withholding somebody's face for dramatic effects so that when you finally see it, it's more significant. So we haven't seen the Purple Hyacinth's face really. We saw like his profile and his shadow. And here again, his face is cut off. And for good reason, you know, where it leaves us wondering, what does he look like? Because when you see someone's face, you see his humanity, you can see his eyes, you can judge more about his personality. But right now, the authors, 𝗪𝗪 and F, want him to be shrouded in mystery. But you see that he's holding in his left hand a flower. It's a purple hyacinth. And, you know, on the floor is the body of the victim. And then you see again this beautiful image taking advantage of the vertical format. He's dropping a purple hyacinth onto him, and it's a beautiful,
that alone, yeah, it's so gorgeous.
Again, completely lit up, right? The background is black. It's gorgeous. And then, right, so this is the stark contrast, right? The contrast is this beautiful flower. Flowers are always a symbol of, well, obviously we'll learn that purple hyacinths have a specific meaning, and that all flowers have a specific meaning, but in general, flowers are associated with beauty and grace and delicacy and love and affection. And they're like a symbol of the nicer things in the world, right? The world has so many bad things, but flowers are always associated with the beauty of the world. But that's the first image. But the second image you get to right afterwards, it's bathed in a pool of blood. So he took this beautiful flower, the assassin took this beautiful flower and spoiled it. You know, he trashed it, made it into something associated with murder and enveloped in murder. So it's a very poetic image.
And it's cool that we get the title drop right after it, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Should leave us wondering, you know, right? What's the meaning? The whole cartoon is titled Purple Hyacinth. So like, what's the meaning of Purple Hyacinth? And I don't think we're going to get to it in this episode, but it's definitely something that has significance, as we will learn later in the cartoon. But the cartoon hasn't mentioned it specifically. Obviously, everyone has looked it up, but, but it's definitely a key part of, you know, at some point the characters themselves will figure it out too. So, so now we get to 7 hours ago, right? What was happening before this scene? And we have a total contrast of scenery. It's daytime. You know, everything's bright and yellow. It is still pretty in terms of coloring. It does have, every episode has like a color, I think, palette. So this is like yellow. And you see the castle, and then you see the royal flag, and it's the kingdom of 𝗪𝘳𝗪. But now you also notice that there are a lot of purple hyacinths around. They're in this flower shop with purple hyacinth, and the flag, it's the royal symbol crest has purple hyacinths surrounding the deer. And which, by the way, I just want to point out the crest and the royal symbol I know was drawn by 𝗪𝘀𝗻. So credit to her.
Oh, that's awesome. I did not know that. That's
cool. So you notice that and also in random people's windows, you have a lot of purple hyacinths. So that's something, you know, like, okay, did he choose that as a measure of intimidation to show, hey, I have power over you. I'm using the royal symbol. And, you know, I mean, this is my symbol of murder and you have no, you know, this is your symbol, but you really have no control over your own kingdom. So that's that's one potential way that you can interpret the use of the purple hyacinth. So now you see we're zooming down on what looks like a cafe and some blurred out text. People are having a conversation. And you see a girl, a woman, we find out it's Lauren, and looks like she's on a date with this guy. Now, the very fact that the word symbols, the word bubbles are blurred out, to me indicates, and that the first image we have is like of her fiddling with her mug, indicates that she is not quite interested in what he has to say. What did you guys read of that introduction to the date?
No, I agree, especially since none of these words are important to us, that anything that, clearly she's not the one talking, so anything that this guy has to say is not important or relevant or meaning much at all.
I kind of I took it as like oh hey, we're like kind of like how in the show like you hear like the murmurs of like the town and whatever. That's how I took it, but that makes sense too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you also see the very next image we have is of her looking away. You know, when you're interested in someone and you're having a good conversation, you look into their eyes, but she's just looking to the side. She's not very interested. And she's looking out the window. So now we actually see she's looking out the window, and who does she notice there? She notices a little boy with a newsboy, and he's wearing a newsboy cap. And I don't remember if this showed up in episode 1 in the prologue. Did the image show up in episode 1?
I always assumed that the boy that got taken like away from the scene was the same kid that we see in the newspaper, because there are 2 kids. The kid has some freckles on his face, but it's never confirmed if it's the same person, so we don't know for sure.
Do you, in the prologue with the Allendale tragedy, do we get to know about the boy that looks like this yet? Does he show up in the prologue?
I don't. So he's in the. I think he's in the prologue. It's when Harvey, or the patrol person, takes away the kid while Lauren rushes in to get the smoke bomb. That was my understanding, that this kid is the same kid, but I mean, we don't get that direct like name reference because we never find out his name. So I'm not entirely sure.
So let me just take a quick look at the prologue because I want to see if someone shows up there. Oh, okay. Hold on. No, okay. So we don't know why, but she is drawn to, she notices this boy. We don't know why yet, but we'll learn why. This boy with this look. So, okay, I just wanted to, I don't want to give away spoilers for anyone who hasn't read the whole story yet. But yeah, but she definitely is attracted to this little boy with his news cap. And, she has that pensive look, which we'll find out in the moment she gets a lot. And again, totally not listening. And her date realizes this. He's like, Lauren, are you listening? Especially if he's a guy who talks about himself a lot. He wants an audience.
And it's also cool how the panel actually, like the door of the shop completely blocks out this guy as well, showing just how insignificant he really is.
Not even in her frame of view.
Exactly.
Not looking, not listening either. And so Lauren, Lauren's this, cute girl, orange, red hair, golden eyes. And he's like, Lauren, are you listening? And then she whips around. She's like, clearly she hasn't been. And then he tells her, your eyes look pensive today, but I must admit, I've never seen such pretty golden eyes before. And of course, Lauren's thinking in her head, that's what they do when I'm bored. And she's clearly sick of hearing this conversation. And he's just totally flirtatious. He's like, I presume your beauty and charm have left a trail of heartbroken men, wink. And yeah, Lauren's flattered, but not really. Thank you, Mr. Evans, I highly doubt it. But if I ever did, I must have been too focused on my work to notice. So she's letting him know that work is very important to her. She's not the kind of person who chases after men or maybe even focuses on relationships. I honestly was surprised, especially given what we read later. I was surprised she was on a date to begin with. Yeah. I didn't think she would be interested in dating. She seems like the kind of person who's very focused on her work, and she tells us that straight out. Now, he says, oh, yes, I understand it's the same for me, but it's in red. And we know that it took me a while actually to realize what the red part meant, but red means lying. So he clearly does not care about work that much. And he tells her that his parents own the Evans company and he's supposed to take off the business after them. I've been working hard not to disappoint them, which he hasn't. He's not been working hard. So Lauren does not really respect that. And then he tells her something even worse. He says, but all they ever care about is how I'm 28 and still not married. I mean, I'm single, so what? It's okay too. So she's like, oh God, she knows he's lying. And she says, like, God, this bastard is cheating on his wife. Like, not only is he, self-aggrandizing and uninteresting, he's also a bad person. And she notices outside, somebody outside, and, this other girl with short hair. And she, her eyes go wide. She's like really happy that she sees her. And this woman turns around, looks at her, and notices that she's in this state. And she makes this adorable face. She's like, hi, I'm so excited I randomly saw you in this corner shop. It's adorable. And it's we'll learn, very indicative of who she is as a person.
Yeah. Honestly, when I saw just that panel, I was like, okay, Purple Hyacinth, you've got me. Like, I'm in for this whole ride. Like, just that picture of who we know is Kim, like, just Hook, line, and sinker, you got me.
Really cute. So, and immediately she's like, "Hi, Lauren, it's me," and she does this really cute, dancey kind of thing. Clearly she's very like silly kind of character and just enjoyable. And Lauren has this face like, "Rescue me, Kim." And she literally says that. And meanwhile, the guy is still talking. He's like, "I really respect the risks policemen take every day to protect the city." Again, he's lying. He doesn't respect those risks. And Kim is just like, looking at him. And now, Krystine, you can take over.
Sure. So he's just spouting out more lies. Once I was shopping some friggin' bargain and held the cashier at gunpoint, so immediately threw myself, blah, blah, blah. Like, okay, stop lying, dude. And Lauren just looks at Kim and just looks at him, and the look is like, "Please save me." And you see Kim salute and just say, "Your wish is my command." And then you see like Kim, I call it like the anime like transform, like look. And then yeah. And then you just see Kim just like smash her face into the window.
She is completely dedicated. Like you can see those two have a good rapport between them. And like they didn't even need to use words. It was all just gestures, but they're obviously close where they can communicate like that. And she's willing to hurt herself for the sake of Lauren.
I think she would have done it anyway.
That's true.
She probably is I can see Kim also having zero patience for useless men. Yeah, honestly, even without like Lauren's lie detector ability, Kim probably would have also been able to tell he was lying.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we just see like Mr. Evans like looking like, "What the heck?" And Lauren's like, "Oh no, dear Lord, it's my blind friend. Excuse me, I must go help her. It was nice meeting you."
This line and this little moment is, I feel like it's some form of foreshadowing that maybe in the future, obviously we know that Kim is putting up an act right now, pretending to be blind, but what if it becomes a reality in the future? Like it's always in the back of my mind when I think about going back to this episode for sure.
No, Kim, no.
That would be sad. But maybe, I mean, we know that in the prologue, Lauren talks about being blind, right? She said all these years she was the blindest of them all. Maybe there's something to it about Kim. I mean, there's a lot that Lauren will learn keeps to herself, and Kim is clearly not privy to a lot of that is happening and going to happen in Lauren's life. So maybe in that sense, that's definitely true.
Right. And then from there, Mr. Evans like grabs Lauren's hand and is like, "You can't just rush off like that. Don't make me waste my time." And Lauren just like grabs his wrist and says, "You're right. You really shouldn't waste time on me. Maybe you should use it to help out your company for real this time, or spend more time with your wife." And that panel, I was like, yes. Teach him who's boss.
And the first thing that I thought when I saw him say that, he grabbed her hand and said, "Don't run off like that. Don't make me waste my time." That is a sign of an abusive personality who feels that they're entitled to you. "Oh, you made me sit here. You made me sit here for 30 minutes or however long it was." And that somehow entitles him to her whole self. I mean, that is a very disturbing behavior for me. In addition to the lies he previously told, to me, that's like, okay, this is an abusive guy.
His poor wife.
Yeah.
Let's hope maybe she's also nasty, and maybe they deserve each other.
Oh no. And so Mr. Evans is like, "What?" And Lauren's like, "That poor woman married to a cheating bastard like you. But even though you're such a human disgrace, I've still dedicated my life to protecting ungrateful cowards like you." It's just instinct, Have a lovely evening, Mr. Evans.
In this like
Bravo.
exchange, like Lauren kind of just throwing everything, every lie that she's heard from him right back into his face, shows that like she does not care, right? She's willing to be very open about what she does, especially if someone gets on her like bad side in this case, because she was willing to put up with Evans up until he started getting physical and starting to demand more out of her than, you know, just a required date.
She also has a good memory. I mean, she wasn't listening to anything he was saying before, but whatever she did listen to, she remembered, and she spit right back at him in a sharp, cynical way. So she's a clever cat.
And then the next panel, we see this mysterious man looking at Lauren and smiles and just says, kind of like chuckles.
Yeah, so
Who
when I
is
first
this
read
man?
that, yeah, I didn't know who he was back then, but I was like, this is a man who appreciates her bravery and her you know, her chutzpah is the word.
Yeah. Yeah. Like, oh, like my kind of woman. But yeah, and then Lauren steps out of the cafe and says, like, Kim, stop, you can't afford to lose your brain cells yet.
For this shot, when we see outside the cafe, the posters in the back kind of, it says fold and iron. I always thought it was odd that a coffee shop or a cafe shop would have those kind of pictures. So I always thought there was some kind of history behind the shop, other than maybe it wasn't always a coffee shop.
Coffee shop.
Yeah.
I wonder if it'll come up in the future. Cool. Yeah. And by the way, Kim is like super dedicated to this blind person role. She's just randomly thinking her head against the glass, which I think a normal person, even if they're blind, would not do that. You know, they're like, okay, I feel the glass now. I won't. But she's just all out dramatic. She's a clown. She is enjoying herself. She likes making a spectacle. So she's like, yeah, let me just keep banging.
All right, and then we see, thanks a lot, Kim. I was dying there. Swear to God, next time you're the one banging your head on the window. And no, I'd be smashing that guy's head into the window. Honestly, same. And we see them like walking towards that little boy that passed by. And Kim's like, still though, I'm fascinated by how unlucky you are with these weirdos you're trying to date. Please don't say this one told your eyes are pensive too. Lauren's like, don't even get me started. Uncle says that dating's part of moving on, but
I guess this is, yeah, this is where we learn. I also, like, remember, I didn't think she would date at all, but like we see she apparently does date, and now we understand why. It seems like she's doing it for her uncle and not really out of her own volition. It's not something she's drawn to doing because she wants to have a relationship.
It kind of feels like it's just something she's doing as like a checklist just to get her uncle off her back.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also we learned just from that, you know, that her primary caretaker or the adult she's like reporting to is her uncle, you know, rather than normally we would assume it's parents. So we learned this is the first indication of that she maybe doesn't have parents. But, yeah. And then, you know, the immediate juxtaposition of, you know, I should be moving on is, who do we see?
Yeah.
Someone she's not moving on from.
We see this like little like I call it like a newsy like paper boy, and you just see like the next panel you see like Lauren like intently staring at him, and Kim's just like staring back at Lauren, kind of like knowing what she's thinking, and Kim's just like, hey. And then finally Lauren looks back at Kim, and the kid's like, only 5 cents, 10 years retrospective on the Allendale train station tragedy. And you see Lauren just looks away and tells Kim like, I'm fine. And then Lauren grabs a paper from the kid and starts like looking at the paper.
And we get like a lot of clues about our setting in 𝗪𝘁𝗧 just from this little exchange, right? It only costs 5 cents to get a newspaper, which I mean, I haven't gotten a newspaper in a while, but I think it's more than 5 cents from my understanding.
Yeah.
And like the cars are very old fashioned. It's nothing compared to what we have nowadays. So we know that our setting in general is further back.
Mm-hmm.
It's an interesting mix because there's many elements that are modern. Like I read a lot of, like I said, classics. So I kind of do have a good orientation of timing. And this is a whole jumble, of time periods. And they said it's, it's not meant to be in a particular time. There's a lot of things that are inspired by the Victorian time period, but then there's more modern inventions, like there's telephones and radios, and, and it's a mumble jumble, but the setting is really cool. It's inspired a lot by the Victorian era, their costumes and the, the accessories.
Mm-hmm.
But you see, like Kim is aware of Lauren's pretty much obsession, and she also tries to distract her. Like she, and Lauren's aware that Kim is aware because she tells her I'm fine. So this is clearly something that they know about each other. Again, indicating the closeness of the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Like they don't have to say like anything, like just looks.
Right. And Lauren is so obsessed, we'll find out that she already knows a lot about the Allendale, train tragedy, but like she's just not stopping. It's a random newspaper. Is it going to give her new information? Probably not, but she purchases it and she starts reading it right then and there on the paper, even when she's with her friend Kim. She's distracted. She's drawn to it. She can't stop herself. She's just obsessed.
And it's such a different contrast to how she was on the date, where she was just wandering and so bored, while she is focused and willing to ignore her own friend just to see if maybe something new comes up on this newspaper. She's always hoping for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the newspaper is called the Le Journal, and the title is 10 years after Allendale station tragedy. So we know it's 10 years later. Memorial ceremony will be held in the name of the victims. The rest of it is blurred out. But that gives us a good sense of timing. And the fact that it's still very present in the mindset of the citizens. It's big enough to make the headlines of the newspaper, and they're having a memorial service. So it was a big deal to the entire country.
Mm-hmm. Lauren's still looking, and then we just see Kim just grab Lauren by the neck and was like, "Come on, Lauren, tell me more about your date." And Lauren's like, "Okay, you're not gonna believe this. So first tea," and then we fade off to Lauren going back home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's where Inspirashamul will take over.
All
but
right.
Kim is trying to distract Lauren. Kim is like, you're not gonna go wallow in your introspection and theories. Like, we're gonna go back to present time and more cheerful topics.
Mm-hmm.
And it's impressive that Kim actually got Lauren distracted for a couple hours, because we know that it was still daytime, and now that we're transitioning into nighttime, Lauren finally gets the chance to sit down and really look at what she cares about, really. Mm-hmm. So the night is setting that mood that we got in the beginning of the first part, where we had the nice light on the Hyacinth's back, and we transition and we see a pretty lovely house, right? So we can assume that this is the Sinclair's house. This is where she lives. And we know that they have a maid, so they're rich enough to afford a maid. Lucy over here is the one. She's used to Lauren being late, right? Because she says, "You're home late, work again." So it's not common. Lauren is someone that spends overtime or works overtime, or probably follows up on something or the other. So it's rare for her to be at home. And it's kind of indicative, like it kind of shows that in the dialogue here. And it's funny that we actually find out that today is Lauren's off day, and yet she's still late and she still needs to catch up on some paperwork. It's very, very, I guess, pertinent in how Lauren is as a character, right? She's willing to use her day off. Like for me on my day off, like I am just laying in bed, like watching some Netflix or something. Like I'm not working overtime, that's for sure.
Mhm.
Well, we don't know if she worked that day. She definitely had a date, right? And she went out with Kim, so we don't know what she did. And honestly, when she says, "I think I'll go catch up on some paperwork," to me, that may be her real job. That also may be her other job, which is, obsessing over the Allendale train tragedy, which we'll find out in a moment. So I'm not so sure if she's being truthful about that paperwork
That's true.
statement.
And what's interesting is that we don't actually ever see Lauren lie, because her ability is only on other people's texts. So everything that she says will stay in black no matter what. So we as readers have to interpret, is she actually telling the truth here or is she not?
And I actually think that this exchange shows us a lot about her personality, something that comes up again and again and again. Lauren is a loner. She works alone, and she keeps things very close to her chest. She does not reveal what she's thinking about, what she's theorizing about. She doesn't like to admit weakness. That's a big thing also. She's just invincible. She keeps going, she keeps working, and she doesn't let anyone into her inner life. And that, I think, is going to bite her in the butt, honestly. But it's something you have with Lucy, which presumably she's a trusted maid who she's grown up with, but she doesn't show people her emotional cards, and definitely not her intellectual cards, like what's going on in her mind in terms of her theorizing. So I think it's just something very noticeable about Lauren immediately.
But even after all that, right, even if she tries to brush off the maid, we see in this little panel in the black that, uncle and his household have been kind to her. Like, they were there when she needed them, especially as we learn that her parents, we get a shot of them in the photo. They haven't been around. We don't know how long it's been since they're gone, but they haven't been along probably for a while.
Right. And she also, the fact that she told, she clearly treats the maid with respect, right? She's not like one of those snobby rich people who doesn't think that their maids are people. She treats her with respect, and she's like, "Oh, don't worry about me, worry about you," which is, again, a very Lauren thing. Like, I don't need any help, but let's worry about you. You go to sleep, you should be sleeping and resting. So that's also like a good side of Lauren, that she cares about the people around her.
And then we finally get, and she is really grateful. And we get into what seems to be her study, her office, her place in this household. And she finally gets to sit down, getting ready, not to go to bed, but to analyze this newspaper, as we get the close-up shot of the newspaper. Even though we don't actually see more of the text because it's still blurred out, we get this beautiful transition from the static picture of the police guard in the photo to a little shot of what it was like on that day, presumably, of the Annandale train tragedy.
You already even see with that little shot, there's like a hat, there's a boot on the floor, there's someone's shawl. It's clearly a wreck.
Yeah.
And a scene of personal great grief.
And we find out that for her personally, it's also been 10 years, even if so her pain and her tragedy has been tied to this incident, this train bombing. And we see it again, right? She says, moving on, there's no way that I can move on, right? And she throws her paper. Actually, when she does throw this paper in this panel, where she says, "Who am I trying to fool?" you can actually read a lot of what's on the newspaper. It's just some background information about the world, in a sense, nothing too much out there, but if you do zoom in, you can actually read a lot of stuff that's on there.
Harbor Lighthouse, River and Harbor Bill passes, Postmaster Pram confirmed, latest trigger quotations, fire at New Orleans. So yeah, it's definitely getting like a late 1800s, early 1900s vibe.
Exactly.
Even with the history, which is cool.
And kind of like we see, right, she's still super focused. Even if she threw it away across the room, her eyes and her gaze are always centered around that, because she's like, what if there's more? What if there's more? I can't move on from this. And it isn't until we get this ring from this telephone that her attention is finally drawn out of that trance almost.
She throws it in a box, but I don't think the box is trash. The box is something she keeps there. And maybe it's like not as important enough to go on the board that we'll see later, but it's still part of her, clue gathering.
Her collection, her clue gathering. And then we find out that there's a call. She is called for an emergency. And we actually find out that she is an officer. I mean, we knew that she worked in the police based on Mr. Evans's random text that he was talking about how he would save people. but it looks like the department is willing to trust Lauren and call her at this late hour for something. And we don't know exactly what it is, but we do know that it's at this certain street, assuming that Lauren is close to that street, and that's why they called her at 45 White River Street. I don't know if that's a real street or not, or something that they made up, but. And then we get the transition, and I love the shot when she's putting on her uniform and we see the like shadows of the window, and it always reminds me of the same like window panel like shot that we got of the Hyacinth at the beginning. So I thought that was always a nice parallel, because she's also bathed in this blue light as well.
Those two throughout the series, you know, they're like a foil to each other. They're meant to be in contrast, and we're supposed to see what's similar about them, what's different about them. That's a big theme throughout the whole story.
Oh yeah. And then we finally get the shot of her board. We like to call it her murder board, but you know, I don't know if she actually has a name for it. So we see the board. We also see inside of the box itself how she's been collecting newspapers upon newspapers and any kind of information that she can get. And it's all centered around one thing, the Annandale station or the train bombing. It's always centered around that.
Everything says case unsolved. So
Yes.
we learn it has not been unsolved. And I want to point out a little bit before, if you see the badge, the APD, the Ardhalis Police Department badge,
Yes.
the word that we see is veritas, which means truth in Latin. And obviously truth is a very big focal point of this comic as well. Comic, let's just say story.
Yep.
You know, with Lauren's ability and with what's the truth, and everything's shrouded, and like she thinks she knows the truth, but then the whole prologue says, you know, she thought she knew what the truth was, and then turns out she was the blindest of them all. So that's a very big theme. And obviously the masks are a very big theme as well, because the police department, they all wear masks, and you see she's putting one on now. And we'll learn a little bit later, they vocalize about why they wear masks. But in terms of the story, again, everything's hiding behind a mask. People are not who they appear to be. The person you thought was one thing is actually another thing. Can you trust people? What do you know? What's the truth? So it's all this beautiful web woven together of symbols and that tie into the story.
And also the other word that's on the badge, it says veritas. The other one is justica, which stands for justice. So tied right in with both of them, right? You need justice to find truth. So they work well together.
And, you know, not to spoil the story, but that's definitely a big theme of, you know, Lauren is very pro-justice and she wants to get justice done, but over the story, she's going to find out things that make her question what her version of justice is and what is the true justice to that should be carried out. So again, very big themes in life in general and in the story.
And does justice mean like doing the right thing or doing something that is questionable?
Whatever needs to get done. Yeah, we don't know. And then we get the final shot. We actually see the full murder board in picture. It's not just flapping around in the wind. We actually see it. We see a hat. We see, I think it looks like Ronald Reagan and JFK, but I think those are just placeholders and a map as well. But it clearly shows like,
just for fun.
Yeah, and it clearly shows like, even if it says 10 years later, like she's been looking into this for a long time and collecting this information for a long time, and she's not going to stop anytime soon.
Right. And the newsboy cap is again something that we saw her look at the boy with the newsboy cap, and then we see here. So clearly it means something to her.
Yep.
And all those lines are pointing to a picture, and we can't see who that is.
But we do see a cap, and most likely it's the same cap that she has on the board itself. And the
episode ends with, still couldn't do anything for you. 10 years later, and I still couldn't do anything for you. So she clearly feels, you know, now we learn, basically we assume it's the boy, that something happened to this boy, and she personally feels guilty. And that's why she's so obsessed, that she gets those murder boards. She's distracted by newsboy caps. She gets these newspapers because something happened and she feels responsible that she couldn't do anything for him. And that's where we end this episode with.
Pretty solid episode.
Yep.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts on, what are your thoughts on the episode in general?
I think it had a, no, go ahead.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I think it has a pretty great hook. We find out a lot about Lauren, and she's the main focus of this episode. And it seems that Evans, or Mr. Evans, is kind of the exact opposite of what Lauren is. So everything that he does is something that she would never do. So we learn a lot about her, and we learn a little bit about her support, Kim, and we learn a little bit about her obsession with this train station.
Yeah, we get like the kind of like the underlying tone of the whole story, but we also get like, oh, there's also going to be some like levity too, obviously with the Kim, but we kind of get the sense like, okay, this is going to be kind of like serious.
So I'm just going to do like the clue review. In terms of the clue review, we found out that there's this boy in a news cap that she feels personally responsible for, that something happened to him. The train tragedy was 10 years ago, and that she is obsessed with this. We also find out that her parents are not in the picture. She's been taken care of by her uncle, and that she's close with Kim, and they have a good relationship. And that her uncle wants her to move on. So that's like, I would say, the clue review. And the character review is we learned that she is an obsessive kind of person, a person who works very hard, takes her work very seriously, again, keeps to herself, doesn't really share much with other people, but other people have noticed, other people, Kim and her uncle and the maid, they do notice Lauren's single-mindedness and perhaps unhealthy obsession and want her to stop.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so to be continued.
Yeah.
Yay.
It's a good start.
Yeah.
And thank you so much, Inspirashamul and Krystine, for coming on for this very first, not number one, but number one, but whatever, episode of Purple Hyacinth. And I had a great time. Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that you came on.
Of course,
Yeah,
thank you
thanks for
having
having us.
Awesome. Yeah. Hold on.